Hey reader, welcome to the channel. This is Centaur, and today we are beginning a unit review for the open beta version of the Zerg Roach. Okay, now to be clear, we're going to do an updated unit review once the rules go live, but I wanted to do this one as a test run so you can kind of see what some of the content's going to look like on this channel, how we're going to be reviewing it. I'm also using this as something of a longer form feedback to the team at Archon Studios. So they can get some ideas on different ways to approach and see it and see whether this is what they want the unit to be able to do. And who knows, as we get launched into beta, because on the day that I recorded this, we have not had access yet, although I know that the access is coming for me, to be able to see if is this actually how they want the unit to work. Okay, this also means, and this is intentionally something I'm going to try to do, none of these unit reviews are going to involve anything that we see in beta. So you will not see any points discussed here. You will not see any of the other statistical things we get from when we're playing through games and testing things out. And that's intentional. All of these are spoiler-free reviews. They only use stuff that we have seen so far released to the community through, cards that were leaked at Eschenspiel, cards that were leaked elsewhere, in preparation for the release of open beta. So just know, if you're one of those people who's still waiting for your turn, none of my videos are going to spoil anything you're going to see in there. And that is intentional because I'll be honest, I did not anticipate getting in as early as I did. I'm extremely grateful, and I hope to do my very best in order to help out the community and help out Archon with building a really good game. But I mean, for many games, I've had to wait my turn in order to get stuff, and I have not had early access to things. And so I want to make sure that I'm not spoiling anybody else's fun by, when they finally get in, everything is already known to them, right? And so just know, nothing that I'm going to talk about, with the exception of maybe a little bit near the end on like, okay, we rolled some dice and here's how it ended up working out practically. That's the only thing we're going to be talking about, right? When it comes to the open beta. So just know that in advance. And I know what some of you are probably thinking. You're wondering, Centaur, why didn't you start with the Marine, right? Why didn't you start with the Zergling, right? The obvious building block basic choices for the nations, for the factions that we've seen so far. And the simple reason is because when I play Starcraft II, I play with Roaches. Like, that's what I like the most. And I'm not going to lie, I was over the moon when I saw the Eschenspiel card for the Roach. Like, I love Roaches so much. And so when I thought about which one do I want to do, one, I was just naturally inclined to go with something like the Roach. But two, and more than that, and why I want to start with this one, it's one of the ones that's seen a little more change from the Eschenspiel version of the cards to the more recent open beta versions of the cards. And I think we can tell a little bit of the game design tweaking and some of the adjustments that have happened because of the Roach profile. And so because of that, let's jump in. Let's take a look. So a little bit about what we're going to do. We're going to be taking a look at the stats and special rules that are available. We'll look at those first. We'll also see from there some of the changes that have happened from the Eschen version to the most recent version. We're going to look at offensively what it offers you, defensively what it offers you, and then we're going to look at kind of like, does it actually fill a useful role in your army, right? Do you actually need this thing in order to play the game, right? Is it actually adding something useful and unique that you could use? And then we're also going to take a look at, does it line up with the actual StarCraft gameplay that we know from the computer RTS game, right? Because could be awesome for the table, could be a great addition to your tabletop army, but if it doesn't feel like the unit from StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2, in the case of the Roach, only StarCraft 2, because it wasn't present in StarCraft 1, then that's also worth knowing, right? Because I suspect that the team at Archon wants them to feel still a bit like the computer game. And so I feel like that's useful. And then we'll finally end by asking the question, should you buy it? Right? Obviously, these guys come in starter set. So in that sense, if you're buying a starter set, you're going to get some. But like, if you wanted to buy extras of these, is this the kind of thing that you feel like you could max on or really lean into? Is it worth getting? And we're going to answer that question as well. So to start off with, this is the most recent version of the card. You'll see, for people who haven't seen this before, over at the very top, you've got some basic stats. So your speed is how many inches you end up moving per turn, although that's a little bit of a misnomer because you move one model that number of inches, and then the other models can finish within 2 inches of that model. So it could actually be further, technically speaking, and this is the reason why single models have a special rule called Lone Wolf that basically increases their speed by 2 inches, is kind of to reflect that same change. You'll also notice that you have an evade roll. The evade and the armor are both saves. So once a person rolls to hit you, if they successfully hit before you suffer damage, you have a chance of removing those. Evade saves are used for a couple of different things, most notably when a unit is burrowed for the Zerg. That's an important thing. We'll talk about burrow a little bit more later. Uh, but then if the evade save either doesn't come up or if it fails to save wounds, then you roll armor after that. And obviously, as you can see, and this lines up with the game, uh, armor saves for roaches are really good. Okay, I suspect we're not going to see too many units in the game. I suspect that have more than even a 4+. A 3+ is going to be really good. I think we'd actually be pretty rare to see something even with a 2+. So I obviously we haven't seen a whole lot of profiles yet, but I would anticipate if you see a 3+ armor save on something, that's probably the best you're going to get in the game. And so note that for roaches, that is a really good sign. Okay, that even in the core book, just getting the starter set on first release, you're getting one of the most durable units in the game. And then it follows it up with a unit can suffer a certain number of hit points. Now, what we don't know yet from the rules is whether you have to work down one unit and then remove a model, and then work down the next unit and remove a model. And obviously, in real StarCraft, units sometimes get worked down slowly, right? You'll end up with, the autumn colors of a unit, a command group that you're running around, right? So, you might be able to split it up between the three models in the unit, more on how we know model number in a little bit. It might be that you might just need to work each of these down one at a time. Either way, at least they can suffer a good number of hits, which is good. Size 2 plays a couple of factors. One, it tells you roughly how big the model is, which is kind of nice, right? Within certain bands. So Zerglings are going to be like size 1. Infantry like Marines and Marauders and Roaches are going to be like size 2. But you have things like Queens that are up to like size 3, right? Size 4, things like that. We're going to see larger models until eventually we hit like Ultralisks, right? I have some thoughts on how to do Colossi. That will work on the table, but more on that when we do the Colossi video. Suffice it to say for now, size is also important because certain ledges, right, that we're familiar with in the game are a certain height. And so models who have a size of a certain amount would be able to see over that, right? And they would be able to view what's on top of the high ground without having to actually get up onto the high ground, right? Or getting up onto a ramp. And so all we need to know is size 2 is not that tall. Okay, it is kind of the baseline size, I suspect, for a lot of models in the game. I suspect Zealots are going to be size 2. Your Templar are going to be size 2. Marines, Marauders, Fire Bats, Medics are all going to be basically size 2. Okay. And then it tells you over there with model/supply, the larger numbers are how many models you have in the unit. And I'm going to guess this is purchased in a squad of 3. And while it has 2 to 3 models, it counts as having a supply of 1. Okay. And when it's down to 1 model, it counts as having a supply of 0. Now, this is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, we know that supply is one of the things that gates how many units you can have out on the table at a time. You're going to start with a certain amount of supply, and then as the game goes on with each additional turn, you're going to add additional supply after that. However, what this means is, as you start losing models on the table, you might have quite a few units out, but if they're really depleted, they won't be counting against your supply, which is really nice because if I had 1 roach left out of 3 roaches and it was still taking up the full supply, I'm not going to lie, like that unit would be completely worthless. like it wouldn't do that much for you by comparison to if they would just finish that unit off, then I could bring out a new unit of roaches and it would take up the exact same amount of supply. So I am really glad to see, and I think this is a really good design, that as a unit starts getting depleted to, call it roughly 33% efficiency, it's not really counting against you because it's not contributing all that much. But second, and this is another important thing to note, okay, and there are some ways to monkey with this. If you're doing an objective control style mission, and we know this from some of the special rules that they've mentioned, sometimes who determines who has control of that is determined by the amount of supply that's around it. So if you have like 2 Zerglings and 1 Roach running around, they might each have a supply of 0. And then if you have a 6-man Marine squad, they might have a supply of 1. And so even though you have 2 units, 2 random Zerglings and 1 random Roach, and they have 1 unit of 6 Marines, they would have control of that objective because they have a supply of 1 and you have a supply of 0 plus 0 equals 0, right? And that's really good too because it means that you can't just like swarm out a bunch of little tiny units after they've been cannon foddered and expect them to do something. But there are some exceptions to this. We know that Jim Raynor card that was shown for him, he has a special rules tied to Raynor's Raiders that, the Raynor's Raiders Marines and such, they get extra supply. They basically count as +1 supply for the purpose of being near objectives and for counting objectives and such. I could anticipate we might see maybe some Zerg heroes where, having two random Zerglings, they might still count as one supply because they have a hero near them or they took an upgrade or something else like that. And I think that's really cool. So it means that your zeros, generally speaking, are not going to be helpful for that end. But depending on which faction or sub-faction you end up running, you might be able to get some value out of that, more value than other people's stuff. And I think that is a really cool thing. And that kind of finishes up around the top. As we go into special abilities, these are things that can be used really in any phase of the turn. The turn is going to have three phases. You have a movement phase, an assault phase, and a combat phase, which for those of you who can read, you've already kind of noticed, okay? But the special abilities, as far as I can tell, can be used in any of those phases, okay? And the first one we have is regeneration. When this unit is activated in any phase, see, there it is, any phase, while burrowed, more on that in a little bit, then you heal 3. So basically you would remove 3 wounds on the unit. Now note, this is not 3 wounds on every model. It is 3 wounds across the unit, which makes me think you might be able to assign wounds across your models. You don't have to work them down one at a time, like you do in, say, Star Wars Legion, for example. But what that also means is, you'd be healing, roughly 1 wound per person, maybe a little more if you had to go a little deeper into it, or if you have already lost a model, because maybe you got hit by a really, really big attack, call it by eventually down the line, a siege tank, which might just be able to crack it open, right? Or do a whole lot of damage to one model when the attack hits, right? And then second, we have the burrow ability. This is an active ability, so this isn't just, this is something you'd have to probably spend your activation doing and performing, okay? Whereas a passive thing you just get without having to spend your action for that phase performing. And in this case, the burrow action, it's active. It costs 2 biomass. We don't know a whole lot about biomass, but it's another resource that you're probably trying to manage across all of your units because probably every unit's going to have something you can spend with biomass, okay? And it simply burrows you or unburrows you. Now, the burrow rule is relatively straightforward. While you're burrowed, enemies can't attack you unless they're beyond 4 inches, if they're beyond 4 inches of you. It can only target you with melee attacks, which I would also include. I think charging would probably also be included in this, or ranged attacks unless they're within 4 inches. Now, I imagine we're going to have units coming around, like the Observer, for example, that are going to have a detection ability. And so when, call it when they're within, call it 12 inches of something, they might be able to detect units. And so units that are hidden, which is what's giving you that benefit of not being targetable unless they're within 4 inches, they might be able to ignore that, okay? But this is, on its own, always a really good start. The second thing that burrow does is it means that you always get your evade save, which is really nice, even against close combat attacks, which in general, from what I can gather from the few rules that we've seen so far, you don't generally get evade saves in close combat, okay? You only get your armor save. And so the fact they can burrow is really good. And this doesn't surprise us because that's kind of what roaches do. Okay. One of their best abilities in StarCraft II is that they're really good burrowed units. We also notice that there are some upgrades over there at the top right-hand side. So you'll see the Glow Reconstitution, where the speed value improves from 4 to 5, which is good. Could be really useful. Again, there's actually going to be more than that, right? Because the unit has to be placed within, all the other models have to be placed within 2 inches. So, like having just even that extra 1 inch, it is propelling you even further forward, which is really nice when you have a relatively short-range attack. More on that a little bit later. Tunneling Claws also allows you to perform your move action without losing burrowed, which I think in general you're not allowed to do, which is great, which means, again, not targetable beyond 4 inches, always getting the evade save, even if they can attack you. That's really, really good news to be able to still perform your move at full speed, far as we can tell. And the fact that you can move underneath of people, and so you can maneuver past enemy lines of zealots, or, maybe you need to get past a bunker or something else like that, and so you maneuver around it, without any problems. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do with this, which I think is great. And again, consistent with the game. And then in the movement phase, you get the ability, if you take the upgrade, to burrow ambush. And so in this case, you get to, instead of coming in from your entry zone, which is typically like table edge, point along table edge, something like that, you get to instead deploy fully within, so not barely within and part of your base is outside. The whole base has to be within, which is good rules writing, huge fan, within 18 inches of your entry zone. And as a quick reminder, smaller scale games are going to be 36 by 36. Larger games are still going to be 36, but a bit wider, okay? Or somewhere around there. And if that's the case, being able to start basically halfway up, and even though that then ends your movement phase, so that's all you have to do is basically just place yourself. Being able to start halfway up when you have a short range attack is a really good thing. And that brings us to the assault phase, where we have only one attack option available to the Roach, and that is Acid Saliva. It has a range, which is what that RNG is, of 8 inches. So measuring from the edge of your base to the edge of somebody else's base has to be within at least 8 inches. That, as far as I can tell in this game, is pretty short. We're seeing a lot of units with like 12 to 18 inches or even more than that. And obviously we haven't even gotten to things like siege tanks, things that have a really, really long reach. 8 inches is pretty short. It's not bad, but it's still pretty short. You have a rate of attack of 4, so you get to roll 4 attacks, 4 dice, as long as you're within that 8-inch range. And when you roll the dice, you're looking for a 3 or higher to hit. As far as we can tell, there hasn't been a lot of modifiers to people's hit abilities, as far as we can see so far in the game, which is actually kind of nice because it does speed up the whole rolling side of things, which is really good. And then you have a surge type and a surge dice. Now, those I will reference using the upgrade section below. You'll see that you can upgrade to the Hydriotic Bile, okay? In which case, your ranged weapon, if you take the upgrade, would give you the Surge D3 plus 1 ability. So your Surge dice would be a D3 plus 1. So you'll roll a 6-sided dice, cut it in half, round up, and then you'd add plus 1. So the minimum you could get if you roll a 1 or a 2 would be 1 or 2, divided in half, rounded up is 1, plus 1 is 2, and the highest you would get would be a 5 or a 6, cut in half, rounded up would be 3, plus 1 is 4. So it'd be somewhere between a surge of between 2 and 4. And as long as the target you're hitting has the light tag in it, then when you're rolling hits, however many you roll on the surge, those number of hits bypass the armor roll, which is really nice. Now, you'll notice down at the very bottom left, underneath of where you have the picture of the Roach, you have the Zerg, and then you have tags. You have a bunch of different tags. All you need to know is this Roach is armored. The antithesis of armored is light. Okay, those are going to be your two primary terms. So if it is a light target, like a Marine or a Zergling or a Zealot, or Hydralisk, I think is also light, things like that, then you would get your surge ability, and you'll be able to sneak some of these wounds past them a little more easily, right? Because they don't get a chance to save against some of them. And then the number of wounds that you sneak past those hits is equal to 1 damage each. Okay, so if you were able to sneak 3 wounds past something, you would, 3 hits past somebody, you would do 3 wounds to them. Okay, it also mentions keywords. So in this case, we have target ground. So it indicates you can't target air units. On release, it's not really going to be a big deal because there aren't going to be a lot of air units, like Rainer's Point Defense Drone. I can't actually think of a single other air unit that's releasing early on in Wave 3. So by, October, so near the end of the year, we're going to be seeing some more air units coming out for everybody. But at least when we're starting out the game, you're not being hurt by the fact that it's target ground only. Okay, but it's not bad. We also know that if he were to charge into somebody, then the Roaches would actually do impact hits. And this allows you to potentially do some wounds to people. In this case, you'd roll 2 dice because it's impact hits with the parentheses having 2. And you're looking for a 4+ in order to try to do hits. And a hit is simply 1 damage potentially to the target. And so by simply running into somebody, you might be able to remove some models. Again, depends on how good their saves are. But, if you're able to at least remove a couple hits, then there you go. You might be able to do something before you have to go into close combat. And then in the combat phase, we're fighting up close, right? We're doing stuff. And in this case, the attack is actually not very good, which is consistent with the Roach. The Roach is not nearly as good in close combat as it is at range. And in this case, your range is melee, so you have to be in base-to-base contact or B-to-B contact with people. You get 2 attacks per Roach, looking for a 4+. So on average, you're going to get 1 hit per Roach that you have. You only have 3, so just keep that in mind. It's not very many. And then there's armor saves potentially after that, and each of these is doing 1 damage to the target. So it's not particularly much. And again, no surge ability. Now, this is a slight step up from what we saw at Eschenspiel. At Eschenspiel, obviously, they didn't show us a change in the supply value depending on how far you dropped, which is one thing. You'll also notice that the Acid Saliva only had a range of 6 inches. Okay? In all other respects, it is basically exactly the same. They did clarify for us that its impact hits 4+ instead of saying impact hits a 5+, which is really nice. But otherwise, and, technically, I guess you could technically burrow in the combat phase now, which we weren't able to do before. It did have more claw attacks in close combat. That has been cut in half from the last one. So we've seen that Archon is adapting to what they've seen in playtesting, which is really nice. I suspect that these guys were not only beefy at 3+ armor, but they're probably chewing through things like Zealots or Marines too easily in close combat. Between the impact hits and then having on average 2 wounds per person, I could see why that could be a little much. And so they cut that back. And I think, honestly, looking at it here, I think this is a really good choice. I don't see any problems with the changes that they've made. This seems like a really good fine tune to give a little bit of extra range, an extra 2 inches, which is not much. But hey, it is a little easier to be able to use them for what you really like using them for. But if they do end up getting into close combat, there is a downside to Roaches, which every unit should have. So looking at these offensively, from a movement phase perspective, I'll be honest, the aggressive deploy is the best thing about them, right? Again, you have a short range. You need to be able to reach there pretty quickly. There's not much else, but then again, this is a tank unit. It's not a support unit. This is not really what we're supposed to, like, they shouldn't be doing a whole lot else in the movement phase, especially offensively. Just being able to start up close, that way they can take advantage of getting in and getting in attacks before their wounds run down, is a really good thing. From the assault phase, there's actually quite a bit you can do. Not only do you get somewhere between 4 to 12 attacks on each turn, with admittedly only a range of 8 inches, but with a 3+ to hit, that means on average you're getting like 8 hits, assuming you have a full squad, right? And if you can take wounds across all models, you might be able to maintain that rate of fire for a really good amount of time, which is really great. The ability to potentially surge against light targets with a D3+1 is also really good. It means that if you're getting 8 hits, being able to sneak roughly a third to half of those in is really good and quite advantageous. And the fact that you can do 2 impact hits on a 4+ if you need to charge into something because maybe somebody's holding an objective and you just really got to get in range of that objective and you got to clear things out, it may not be a bad idea. Just be able to rush in there, do some wounds, maybe remove some models, and then just chew through things, okay? I do think, in general, I will probably be reserving charging with these guys unless I'm absolutely certain that shooting at them is not going to solve the problem, because, again, their close combat attacks are not nearly as good. But I do think that it's at least a good thing to know you have, right? And in that vein, combat phase, I mean, it's pretty average, right? I mean, you get 2 to 6 attacks, 4+ to hit, damage of 1, no surge. That's not great. I think it's a good base for your damage. I don't think you can rely on these guys to really win the game for you. And so as much as I'm a Roach Rush person, when I play Starcraft II, I will probably be augmenting Roaches with something else when it comes to running these things. More on that in future videos. Defensively, I think, is actually why we like the Roach. This is where I think they're going to be really, really good. Because first of all, they can move even while burrowed, which makes them a lot safer from ranged enemies, which is the overwhelming majority of enemies in the game. In the assault phase, they're going to have really good damage mitigation from assault units because not only they can do range damage back to try to remove some of the models that are attacking them, but also the fact that they can burrow, right? If you really want to, you could just say, oh, I'm just going to burrow. I need to stay alive, right? And so now I'm still within range of this objective, or I'm still, on the table contributing, but now I'm getting that not great, but evade save on top of my armor save. And I'm forcing them to come pretty close to me, which when I only have an 8-inch range, it's really nice if I'm forcing people to come within 4, right? So draw them in, cause them to have to get in. They're spending turns moving, and then I can jump up and I can attack them with my bile. In the combat phase, I'll be honest, weird take on this maybe. I don't know that I would actually fight in the combat phase. I think if I think I'm going to be assaulted by somebody, I think I'll burrow and then just stay under, because then as soon as I activate, one, I'm getting the 5+ evade save from, if they attack me first, I'm getting the 5+ evade save followed by a 3-up armor save. I'm not going to suffer too many wounds. And then when I activate, I'm just going to heal 3, right? And that might actually be more effective than attacking back in a weird way, because if I were to just attack, I'm getting somewhere between 2 and 6 attacks on a 4+. That's 3 wounds back to the enemy before they roll saves. And assuming they get at least a 5+ armor, which a lot of units in the game I imagine are going to have probably a good bit better than a 5+ armor, they're going to block at least one of those, right? I'm only doing 2 wounds back. But if I remove 3 wounds off myself in the combat phase and just stay burrowed, and that's all I do, I just literally just stay burrowed, that could be really advantageous. But more than that, if I'm not planning on moving away, then I can start my activation burrowed at the beginning of the next move phase, heal 3 more, and unburrow as my activation for the movement phase. And then in the assault phase, I might be able to shoot at people, which is really nice. And now I get my shooting attack back. And then if I really need to in the combat phase before they start attacking me, I activate these guys first and I burrow again. And now I'm getting my evade save back and I'm doing stuff. Which, for those of you who haven't played StarCraft 2, is exactly how you're supposed to use roaches. Okay. You're constantly, it's a whole micro of like pop up, shoot, pop down, heal up, pop up, shoot, pop down. Like it's a whole thing. And from what I can tell, from how they've designed the game, you could do that, which is really great, right? And so being able to utilize their special rules quite effectively, I think is going to line up with how they're actually designed. And so what role are these guys going to fill for you? First of all, it's going to be a durable tank. I don't think we're going to see a lot of units with definitely better than a 4+, possibly not even better than a 5+ armor save until Ultralisks, which, depending on what classic ground looks like, could be as early as December of this year. But I think for the beginning part of it, if you want units that are just going to survive and you're not picking models up off the table in large numbers, I think the Roach is where you're going to go. Okay. Second, the burrowed movement to reach objectives with greater safety means not only are you more durable, you might be able to cross the board and get to places without taking nearly as much of a beating. So that way, when you do get to the place on the other side of the board, you are still alive and very much alive and able to take a lot of punishment, which is really advantageous. I also think they can provide some damage output. Okay, I don't think you should rely on these guys being your solid damage people, especially against armored targets. So when we start getting armored units, and currently that's Marauders, which are going to be a really good, strong counter against Roaches, I suspect, as they should be, which is realistic to the game. When you start fighting against Stalkers and things like that, I think you're going to find you're not doing a lot of actual damage to them. They're not going to be removed very easily. And so just know they will help. I think you are going to need to augment them. This is a tank, but it's not an all-around unit. It's gonna be durable. It's gonna hold objectives for you, but it's not going to clear everything on the table in front of you, unless you're going. Maybe if you go against like a Zergling rush. If they're just running Zerglings and you're just running Roaches, you might actually do okay. Honestly, I think that that's okay because that's what they're supposed to be, right? And it keeps them from being overpowered. And we don't want units to be overpowered in this game. We want reasons to take them, but not overall. This is the only thing we ever end up seeing for Zerg. But in addition, and this is important and something that I think is overlooked very easily, this unit's going to have a really small footprint. Okay? It's not going to take up a lot of space on the table, which means if you need to hide them around a corner, behind a piece of terrain, or something else like that, you can do that relatively easily. And if you want to avoid being charged by units, there's not a whole lot of space on the board for them to charge, right? You can deploy up to 2 inches away from the starting unit, but you don't have to deploy that far. You can tuck in and put them pretty close to each other. And assuming they're on somewhere between a 50 to 60 millimeter base, you'll soon be seeing a picture showing one of them being held in hand. I'm going to assume that they're going to go on like a 50 to 60 millimeter base. That's not a lot of space if there's only 3 of them. And once you start losing one, then it could be even smaller, which is really nice. So on the whole, I think you use these guys as durable objective holders and push units. You know, you can push them up relatively reasonably and start fighting people. You just got to augment them with something else. And does this match the computer game? Well, first of all, from what it looks like, yes. It looks very close to what you see in the computer game, which is awesome. You'll also see, based on, roughly the feet look to be roughly about 2 finger lengths apart, which tells me that they're going to go on a base slightly larger than that. So I'm thinking 50 to 60 millimeter base. That's my guess. But I think in the game, they're a very durable tank with tricky movement shenanigans, which this thing can do. Both between the burrow, heal, unburrow attack, burrow, heal, unburrow attack sort of thing, but also just like they have a lot of hit points for how much you spend, right? I mean, getting upwards of 100 hit points for 100 resources is really good, right? And they do get really, really fast healing. So, when they're burrowed, which is consistent with everything. They get reasonable damage. They're reasonably effective, especially against weaker units. Okay, they don't have a really strong rate of fire in the game. But I mean, on the whole, I think that they've mimicked it really, really well. I think that this is really good. I don't think it's a particularly broken unit. And as to the question, does it line up with what we know from StarCraft II? I'm giving it a vote of yes. Great job to Archon. Well done. This is exactly what I would look at. And again, my favorite unit for the Zerg in StarCraft 2, I think he nailed it. I think this is exactly right and exactly how it should look. So should you buy this thing? Well, with the knowledge again that I'm a rep for the Roach and I love Roaches, obviously, yes, right? I am slightly biased on this. But in addition, I honestly think if you're transitioning over to playing the tabletop game and you're looking to start, I think this is going to be a very forgiving unit. I think you can make a lot of mistakes. I think your opponent can roll crazy high, way above average, and they'll still be around, which is really nice because it means you get to play the game, right? Whereas if somebody rolls out of the box shooting at a bunch of Zerglings, for example, they might remove so many of those things that you suddenly find you can't do anything with them and you can't actually play the game. And I think the Roach is going to be a very forgiving unit because if nothing else, it'll be on the table for multiple turns, okay? I also think you're going to want to take the Roach Warren so you can get the upgrades. I really don't think that the Roach is going to be particularly good without its upgrades. So when you're spending your upgrade points, your Vespene gas, sort of stuff in order to upgrade your units, I really do think if you're going to run Roaches, please do prioritize the Roach Warren. You are going to regret it if you don't have that because most of the benefits that come from the Roach, access to surge, access to better movement so you can close distance, access to the movement while burrowed, all of that stuff is tied to upgrades, not to mention the burrow ambush, right? So I do think you're going to want to pay for upgrades on these, okay? This is one of the things where I think you should splurge. I don't think necessarily every unit that we've seen needs to have these. More on those in a future video. But suffice it to say for now, the Roach, I think if you're planning on running them, please do invest in them because otherwise you're not going to get much out of them, okay? This is also a core unit. You saw this on the tag, that it has the tag core as its first one. And all you need to know is different units slot into different stuff so that people aren't running just a 100% Ultralisk army is basically what it is. But core is going to be the one you're going to get the most of. And so if you're like me and you just really like fielding Roaches and you want tons of Roaches, it sounds like you can get them. And you can take a lot of them in whatever army you end up running, which is really nice because, again, some of us really like doing the Roach Rush. And so you can play that style on the tabletop, which is awesome. It also comes in the starter set, so it'll be easy to acquire. Not to mention the fact that we know we'll get individual box sets where you can buy them in sets of 3 additionally, which is really nice. And finally, and this is something that for tabletop miniature games is a little bit different from the RTS game. So if you're coming over just playing computer games and this is one of your first times dipping your toes into a tabletop game, they look dope. Okay? Like, even if you're not the greatest at painters, look at the details on those, right? And again, I don't even have a physical one to hold up and show you. From the details that we've shown, they look awesome. They got the cool spiky bits. There's a lot of opportunities for contouring and texturing and stuff like that. You can do some really cool stuff with creep on the base. Like there's a lot of options here. And I think that is an underappreciated thing when you're walking into a game is how cool are these things going to look? And I think you should run these if for no other reason than you're going to look at them on the table and say, oh yeah, my army looks awesome. And that's a really good thing. Even if you're getting blown off the table, at least you're like, well, at least they look beautiful. They look really, really good. And I want to run something that looks impressive when you first look at it. And so that's a video, right? That's all we're going to be talking about. We'll be doing these as unit reviews for every single unit that we've seen. And again, we're not going to spoil anything you haven't seen yet in open beta. Once open beta is opened up and a lot of people are in it, apparently there's over 2,500 of us who are interested in doing it, which is awesome. Please provide the feedback. They're going to need it. Then, we may end up looking into some of the other stats and stuff like that. But from where we're going to start, we're just going to be looking at the stuff that has not been spoiled yet because I want you guys to all have fun. Right. And so let me know down in the comments below which unit you'd like to see next. We're going to be rotating. Obviously, most of it's going to be, Terran and Zerg because those are the cards we've seen so far. But I have a rough lineup of where it is that we're going to probably be going next. But let us know what it is that you think. Do you think that the Roach is too weak on the offensive side, that they're not going to put up enough numbers for you, so to say? Do you think that this unit is actually overpowered in its current format and it's just going to be way too easy to abuse? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.